Let's get a quick take on the New York Times publishing a piece about the legacy of former Denver Mayor Benjamin Stapleton and its connection to his great-grandson, Republican candidate for governor Walker Stapleton. Patty Cahoon from Westward. Some people have called this a hit job. Some people they think it's going to be an issue for the rest of the election. When you saw the piece in the New York Times, what did you think?
Well, we'd heard about this for a while. In a state where you have a mountain and a town and a road dedicated to Territorial Governor John Evans, who essentially was found culpable with the Sand Creek Massacre, the past is always going to be with us. You have to acknowledge it. Stapleton was a hot topic before the great-grandson of Benjamin Stapleton, mayor and KKK member, decided to run for governor. He needs to acknowledge the past and then move on, but he has to deal with it publicly.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. Is there an angle from this whole event that we're missing out there in the public?
Well, the theme of the New York Times to its core Manhattan readers is you need to be very afraid of everything west of the Hudson, and especially out in those big square states where they all have guns, they're married to their cousins, and most of them are Klansmen, and so you'd be safer visiting Paris or London rather than venturing into crazy areas like New Jersey or Pennsylvania, let alone Colorado. One of my friends from my kid's school was actually a descendant of one of the Byzantine emperors, and actually had the exact name as one of the Byzantine emperors, who, like the Ku Klux Klan, were extremely anti-Semitic and anti-Catholic. But this guy was very nice, and he wasn't prejudiced against anybody, and there is no reason to impute to our current gubernatorial candidate the misguided views of his great-grandfather.
Eric Sonman, political analyst. It's July, so we see something like this. I don't know if it's going to have much of an effect, but it's the name of a neighborhood. There's protests, not protests there, but they're just trying to change the name there. Does this have any legs past this week?
It's something he'll have to address. It will continue to percolate. It's not going to decide this election. It's not going to be what we're talking about come November. This one for me, and I've been outspoken on it on social media, it's a pretty easy one. What Walker Stapleton does, his record, his values, is completely fair game. The fact he wants to wrap himself up in Donald Trump, have Tom Tancredo give his nominating speech, all of that is fair game, and he needs to answer for that. There's a concept in this country, that we don't hold the kids responsible for the sins of the parents. We're not talking about the parents here. We're talking about a great-grandfather who was dead 30 years before Walker Stapleton was born. I think this article was a stretch. I think it was questionable journalism. And the quicker it's forgotten, though it won't be, the better.
Penfield Tate, attorney at QTech Rock, also a longtime state lawmaker. So as a former elected official, how do you handle something like this when it comes down the pike at you?
Walker needs to do, I think, essentially three things. Number one, he needs to make sure he quits hiding from voters. And when the New York Times does an article and wants a comment from you, you need to be available for comment. Good, bad, or indifferent. You need to speak to it. Secondly, I agree with much of what's been said. He's not responsible for what his great-grandfather did, but I think what some people are simply looking for him to say is, that was my great-grandpa. I'm not a Klansman. I'm not a bigot. I can't change what happened before I was born, and move on. And third, he needs to do that because he's wrapping himself up in Donald Trump and some of these policies, which many people perceive to be racist or oriented against people of color. So he needs, for his own sake, to give himself some separation and just deal with the issue once and for all.